everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the extraordinary honor and pleasure of chatting with Grammy-winning bassist Mike Zuniga. In addition to being a bassist, he's the owner, producer, and engineer at Threefold Studios, and he's an extraordinarily busy guy, so we're just fortunate to have this opportunity to sit down and chat. So Mike, as always, we'd like to know a little bit more about you, kind of your past. How did you get started in music, and particularly on bass?
Well, it's kind of one of those stories that starts off from necessity. I started playing in my home church here in Pasadena, Texas, and they needed a bass player, and I always loved the guitar. I think when we're kids, we all kind of gravitate towards wanting to be the lead guitarist, right? Mm-hmm. And I picked up the guitar, and they said, okay, well, we'll teach you how to play guitar. There's a need for bass, but I wanted to play guitar. Well, they said, well, you got to put this finger here and that finger here, and then you got to start strumming, and you got to pick. And I'm like, that's really complicated. I'm like, bass, you just put one finger over here, one finger here, and yeah, I think I like that better. I'm gonna stick with that. But I will say this: after so many years of playing bass, I made the right choice. I love being a bass player. The bass obviously holds the foundation down. It can make or break a band. So I started playing in that band. 12 years old I was, and at the age of 21 is kind of where I started more my professional career. From my church of about 400 or 500 members, I started playing with a Spanish Christian artist. His name is Marcos Witt, and I went from 400 or 500 member church to 20,000 people stadiums, something that was just 0 to 100 type of thing. But it was awesome because that was my first kind of outing. So all the nerves that you could have had kind of growing up, they just had to go out the window immediately. But I started at the church, played. My father was actually a bass player, and he was preaching. He was the pastor of the church, so he would play, then he would preach, and then he would do like an altar call or pray for people. There was no bass player. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I came in. And man, ever since then, 12 years old, I'm 39 years old now, I've loved every single second of being a bass player, really.
Very cool. Now, are you self-taught or did you pursue studies?
So that's kind of a funny story. I was self-taught, and then about 2003, 2004, I was about 21 years old. I get a phone call from an institute here in Houston that used to be based out of Lakewood Church, the old building of Lakewood Church, if any of you are familiar with Lakewood Church. And they asked me to be the bass instructor, and I literally laughed over the phone. I laughed at the director's face, and I said, man, I'm the worst guy possible for this job. And he goes, well, the teacher here says you're a great player, and he says you can do the job. And I said, man, he's never even seen me play. This guy, the teacher, used to work at a very popular music store here in Houston, and that was like the spot to go to for nice high-end basses. So when I would go, I would grab a bass and I would, play around. But then I would see him come, and he was a phenomenal player, and I would get like timid. I would, get shy, and so I would stop kind of playing and just kind of mess with the knobs. And then he would leave, and I would play again. What I didn't know is that he was around the corner, like actually watching and listening to me play. So I told him, this guy, he's never even heard me play. He goes, no, and he tells me the director says he's watched you. He said you think that he's not watching, but he actually was. And I said, well, I'll give it a shot. I said, I've never been taught. And he said, Mike, it's not that you're the best option. It's that you're the only option that you've got. And I said, well, awesome. Okay. So what they did, and that's kind of where my studies started, they would give me the material, and I had to come home and self-teach myself, but I had actual, material to then turn around the following week and instruct the actual students with that. So it's a hybrid being taught and being self-taught. So it was kind of what was used in my journey to make sense of things. I would play things, and I think over the course of time, my ear would develop, obviously, as it does, and I would go, oh, that doesn't sound good. And I go, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds better. I like that. And then I would kind of keep that pattern or that lick or that bass groove, in my back pocket. And I know that when I would play certain things or over certain chords or progressions, I could play these things. I didn't know why I was doing them. I just knew that my ear was telling me. So when I started actually studying theory, it started to make sense. So that's kind of the background for how I came to know a little bit more about bass. And But definitely, and I say this humbly, I do believe, and I always say that it is a God-given talent. I mean, I have met so many people, even now with the internet. Back in the day, we didn't see and hear of these phenomenal players, and now all you got to do is have a camera and record yourself, and you're out, to the world. So
Yeah.
back in those days, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that I've had the journey and the process that I've had, and the opportunities that have come from it, and always just for myself, just giving God, the first place. I say that is a God-given talent, really.
Excellent. Well, and it is always interesting that when you actually have to teach something, even if you had learned in a formal educational kind of system, if you would have gone to a conservatory or something like that, in order to teach, you have to kind of rehash and relearn so that you can present it to someone else, because a lot of times they won't get it the same way you got it, and they're going to ask some questions, and so you have to know all the possible angles. So if they go, well, why do I do it? Well, now I need to be able to explain why does this work this way? And so there's so much more learning from actually teaching that can come about. So that's a great way to have done that. Wow. And looking ahead, I know you've been playing again at Lakewood Church. You mentioned Mr. Witt, and you're very busy. You were just at the 2022 NAMM show playing as well.
Yeah, that was an awesome opportunity. Yes, sir. We got the opportunity to play at the ADJ Plaza Arena, which is the one off of Catella. Mm-hmm. It was really cool and really nerve-wracking. So it was a little funny because we're representing our in-ear company, which is Sam Audio in-ears. And we have a bunch of artists that were going to be participating. And one of the guys got approved to be on the stage. So we kind of all tag teamed the 40-minute set, and we joined forces. The crazy part was that we're representing an in-ear company, and there are no in-ears. And we're playing full stems, and you've got 10 minutes to set up and sound check what you can and go. I mean, it makes sense. There's bands every single hour. I said, guys, we're going to have to make this work. So literally, we had the stem set up. I ran a click to the drummer, and everything else went to house. I could say as great of a job as the guys did, and the staff and the team at the NAMM show was incredible, but 10 minutes is nowhere near enough time to get a mix set up. So I played basically by inertia, like knowing what I'm supposed to play and locking into my drummer, and we pushed forward. And people were like, how did you feel? How did it sound? Like, I don't think I heard the lead guitarist, which was the main guy, Chris Rocha, and then I don't think I heard stems really too much. I just knew what was coming, so I just played it. But all that being said, it was such a cool opportunity. I mean, I've been going to NAMM for several years, and just to have that honor to play on a main stage at NAMM is such a cool thing. I remember being a kid, and I don't think I could have ever thought of some of these things that have happened over the course of the years, and I'm just so grateful. And it was such a blast, even though it wasn't a comfortable setting. It was a fun setting. We had fun. We jammed out, and we look back and we're just like, wow, that was incredible.
Yes, I've heard from the live performance, there's been a few musicians. I know one that had a gear malfunction as soon as he got up. I think his pedal it kind of fried the circuits, and he had to improvise of around that. So that was bad. But yeah, NAMM is an amazing thing. And you've been working with, there's a band, Miel San Marcos.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we met the band Miel San Marcos. It's a group of brothers, just three brothers that are kind of the main guys, and then they have the rest of the band. They're from Guatemala. They're from a little town called San Marcos. So the church is Miel, and then they define it by, well, which Miel? Well, Miel San Marcos, what campus, if you will. And they started out years back. We met them at their church. It's like a 5-hour drive when you land in Guatemala City. It's all mountain and all curves. Like if you were just to do a straight shot, you'd probably take, I've heard, I think it's like a 1.5, 2-hour drive at most. It's a 5.5-hour drive just doing circles in the mountains. You get there, we meet them, incredible guys. They loved what we were doing with the artist that we were actually at their church with. His name was Qualo Zamorano, and they said, man, we want you guys to work with us. Myself and my buddy Chris that was with us at the NAMM show, And so we produced some songs for them on a record that they did live. It was called Proezas. And then we had made that connection. And then in 2017, we did a live recording in Madison Square Garden. That's a bucket list for me. I mean, just seeing so many iconic bands and artists go through there, and to just be able to say that, you've been on that stage. And it was funny because some of the guys that were working the show from the Garden obviously have probably never heard of this band. And I overheard a comment that said, man, if they get, a couple thousand people, like, we'd be impressed. And he kind of saw that I overheard that, and, didn't say anything. I didn't say anything either. It was a sold out show.
Wow.
I don't know, it's like 15,000 people that fit in there, 16,000 people that sit in there. And they actually came up to us after the concert and said, as many years as I've been working the Garden, I've never seen people stand up at the downbeat of the first song and not sit down for the entire 4 hours of the concert. Like, the people were just super, super connected. An incredible night. There's a little quick story before that was just chaotic and crazy, which I think made that night even more incredible. So that was right when Hurricane Harvey hit Houston.
Ooh.
So I was supposed to fly out on a Sunday night. Harvey hits on Saturday evening. I get stranded at my brother-in-law's house. We were watching one of the Mayweather fights. So anytime he fights now, I'm like, I'm not going out. I'm like, I'm staying here. Just don't know what's going to happen. So we're out there. We get stranded. My vehicle floods. We're stuck at the house. And it's like Monday comes around. Well, Sunday comes around. Monday, Tuesday. And the guys are like calling me frantic, like, we need you to get here. And I said, they're like, well, go to Dallas. Go to Dallas. And from Dallas, we'll fly to New York. I said, man, I can't even get to my house. It's 10 minutes from here. I'm literally like on a little island. Everything else is, 3-4 feet of water.
Yeah.
This is the only area that we, thankfully, the house is good. So long story short, I made it to Dallas. And then I make it to New York at Friday night at 11 p.m. I land for a 12 p.m. Saturday sound check and 7 p.m. Saturday night concert. So no rehearsals with the band. I had maybe 1 or 2 initial rehearsals, maybe about a month back. And then I was playing half the show, and then one of the brothers is a bass player. So when he sings, they get me to go out there, and I'll play bass, and he just focuses on singing. Mm-hmm. So he comes back after a couple songs, and Madison Square Garden completely sold out. He's like, Mike, this is amazing. Oh my goodness. He goes, what's the next song? And I go, well, it's this song. And he goes, is that me or is that you? And I go, no, that's you. And he goes, okay. And in Spanish, he goes, dale tú. He goes, you got it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Now here's the catch that I didn't say. Stuck for 4 days. Wore the same clothes for 4 days. Washed the same clothes for 4 days. Had none of my gear. Had nothing. And I had never heard his songs.
Oh, wow.
I was supposed to study them, but life happened, as you said a little bit earlier. So he goes, you got it. And I look at the director and I go, I don't know the song. And he goes, what do you mean you don't know the song? And I'm like, I don't know the song. Is it a fast song? Is it a slow song? I've never heard the song. And he goes, what? And I go, what key is it in? And he says, it's in this key. And I go, okay, I'm just going to lock into the drum. Kind of like the NAMM show.
Yeah.
And so I had a little bit of experience I was prepped for the NAMM show. So I literally, maybe 10, 15 seconds go by and I hear 1, 2, and I have no time to stress. It's showtime.
Yeah.
And I probably played about 80%. And when we go back and we're listening to it, I said, it was a live recording. So I said, take out the first verse and the first chorus. That's trash. None of that's going to work. Second verse and second chorus and on, I've got it. Like I locked in by that time. So they literally just took those and replaced them back into the front. So I'm like, man, I think I'm going to add that on my resume. Like, I played a couple of songs in Madison Square Garden that I'd never heard in my life, and I got about 75 to 80% of it right. And I think that a lot of that, too, it comes back from experience in the church. Like, I've heard so many other church musicians that do different type of gigs and, shows. It's just so off the cuff in church sometimes that I feel like that was the perfect preparation for stuff like that. You've got your set, you've got your, you know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, the singer, at the church comes into his head, like, let's do this song. And they just change the script, flip the script on you. So those are really cool kind of beginnings and preparations for stuff like this. So we're in the Garden, we're playing, phenomenal thing. such a cool experience. And actually, speaking of miel, we're going to be in the crypto arena. I think it's July 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. So it's the next follow-up album to the Madison Square Garden. So we're looking forward to that. Of course, rehearsals are coming up. Praying no rain, no hurricanes come this time. I'm going to try to be a little bit more preventative this time for this show. So I might just get to California about 3 weeks early. That way there's just no issues this time. But it's such a cool thing. They're a great band. They really are making such a difference and one would say a splash. It's not a splash. I think that they've just created like a tidal wave, and such great opportunities are coming from being part of that band. And the cool thing for me is that I think my earlier years I was kind of locked into an artist in a band, and I think as the years kind of progressed, I think just favor and grace and obviously excellence that I try to give in everything that I do has kind of allowed me to be part of different projects and artists without having to be locked into something. Because I think back in the day, a lot of them knew each other in the Spanish Christian industry, and they didn't want to ruffle feathers. So because I was with someone, I wouldn't get the call to do other projects. But that's kind of been the cool thing as of, I would say, maybe 5-7 years ago. I've gotten to do a lot of different things and be a part of a lot of cool things and really, truthfully, not be locked into an artist, which I think is a miracle in itself. Because it's like once you stop kind of being the guy for someone, it's kind of hard to stay relevant, if you will. But social media, like we were talking about earlier, and just these different resources that we have available, I think have really been what's kind of helped me stay relevant, if you will.
Gotcha. Well, and you're absolutely right. There are some musicians that will lock in with a band and be there for decades,
Yeah.
And then there's others that will have stepped in at key moments and played with groups. And, people that come to mind like Lee Sklar, he's played with James Taylor, he's played with Phil Collins, he's played with a bunch of people.
Yep.
Chuck Rainey, another great example with Steely Dan and another good Texas player there.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
people that when you need them, they can totally step up, and they haven't just been totally locked down to one group. And this is a whole other population. It's a whole other subcategory with it being Spanish Christian music. You might not have the same crossover into other things, and so again it kind of keeps you in a lane. But it's very interesting that they would try to maybe not call you as frequently as they could. Now, being you wear the other hat of being involved on the other side of the glass.
Yep.
For the booth. How did that come about?
I try to do the short story on that one. So 2007, I get a call to produce a record. I played on a lot of records already, or, a good amount of records. And I get a call to produce a record, and I was honest, kind of like the way I was with the director from the school. And I said, man, I've never produced a record. I've been on a lot of productions, but never produced. And I said, that's one thing. I said, the other thing is I don't have a studio. The guy goes, well, where's a spot in town that we could work out of? I know that you're the guy. And I said, well, here. And he goes, well, how much is the rate? Well, it's this much. And he starts doing the math, and he goes, man, you've never thought about opening up your own spot? And I said, yeah, of course. And long story short, he goes, well, how about I front you the money, work out with the guys, take your part, and invest it into your studio? And I go, you don't even know me. Like, you're a friend of a friend. Oh, you're the guy. So he does that. We start building in 2007. Studios open end of 2007, April 2008 opens. And we did the production, and then from there, it just kind of like the live scenario, just word of mouth, and the product speaks for itself. So we started that 2008. I'm actually wearing my T-shirt today, but shameless plug. But yeah, Threefold is a studio here in Pasadena, Texas. Really, over the years, it's kind of turned into like a drum spot, like a spot that drummers would come out and record their stuff. I think the one picture that I sent you is my drum room. And people look at that and go, man, Mike, I didn't know you played drums. And I go, I don't play drums. Oh, you've got so many drum kits and you've got so much drum gear and the mic. And I said, well, it's like anything. This is my take on studio. I'm like, I'm not going to buy, I could, but I'm not going to buy a ton of amps, guitar amps, and then a ton of synthesizers and keyboards. And if I'm sending all that out. So the thing that I do most is drums. So I've invested preamps and EQs and studio stuff and actual drum sets. And even that has been kind of a funny thing that I've even been able to work out some drum endorsements. And again, I'm not a drummer, But it's been cool. So a lot of people would like to come in. Compared to some of the big million-dollar, multi-million-dollar setups, there's a few here in town. Obviously, the rates are astronomically different, but the quality is very, very close. And I say that humbly, but I'm very grateful for the opportunities that come. So yeah, we've been here since 2008 doing productions. Obviously, I do bass work. I'm kind of in a home studio setup that I've got here at the house. So I edit and I do mixing. I've had to tell people, or I've told people that if it was just a bass thing, you know, I get the question all the time when we travel and we do master classes and all these things with these young kids and the new generation that's coming up. If I want to be a bass player, man, like, what do I tell my parents? I don't want to go to school. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And I said, man, if I could go back, I would do it different. I would still do what I did, but I would have a backup. I never had a backup. Thankfully, I think I'm maybe one of the few, right, that didn't ever need the backup. But pandemic, I think, showed us a different story. Like all my friends that said, man, I want to just do what you're doing and just go 100%. You know, we would have conversations. I'm like, man, I bet you're real glad that you've got your normal job right now, right? Because the rest of the music world is at a standstill. But all that being said and done, it's been an awesome opportunity because I do my best to try not to produce like a bass player. So I was guilty of that in my early years. Everything had like really cool grooves and a bass solo or, you know, this or that. So even mixing, I get all the time, hey, Mike, I love it, but could you turn the bass up a little bit? And I would rather be told, turn the bass up than turn the bass down. So over the years, I've kind of learned to wear a lot of different hats. And I tell people, if it was just about playing bass, it would be really hard. But all within producing or tracking or mixing, even prepping live shows for different artists. So I've kind of learned to do it all, which has been helpful in staying relevant and staying busy, especially in these times that we've just lived after pandemic. I honestly, for a little while, thought like, man, will we ever go back out? You know, it seemed grim for a little while. Thankfully, things are getting better. We just did our first trip in Mexico this past weekend, first international trip since the pandemic. It was awesome to just see people out there, and you know, different countries and different places are having different protocols and, you know, things in place. But it's just great to just get back out there. It was such a cool experience, and you know, the things that are coming up, I'm super excited. But yeah, just doing a little bit of everything, man. I don't think that if I just stuck in one lane, I don't think I would be able to do it. But I'm grateful that, you know, I've been able to pick up these different things and kind of put them to use.
As they say, even in general investments, having a diversified portfolio is wide because you can't count on just one thing. So you have to have more than one plan. And one other thing that I will add, and it's a constant beef that I have, because I listen to a lot of albums that get submitted for review. And sometimes they're bass players that I know that are just amazing bass players, but they have been so poorly engineered that what they did is gone. And notoriously the upright players, that all you hear is muffled sounds. And I was like, and they do a little solo and you're like, and I'm like, man, I've heard this guy play live. He's much better than this. They really are doing him a disservice. And then at the other end of the spectrum, I could see where you have to avoid the temptation of going, hey, we're cranking up the bass, everybody, because that's what I like, so that's what everybody's getting. So finding that delicate balance is really good. Since we're talking about sound, in particular, how do you get your sound? What gear are you playing on?
I've got a small pedal set up. I have a Cali 76 compressor, and I'll give it in order, which for a lot of people it seems a little out of place, and I'll get to why. But I've got the compressor up front, very transparent. I don't ever hear it pumping or, you know, moving up and down. I feel like it's just a nice control. I especially see it when I'm tracking. You know, it just really gives every single note. Obviously, that's also proper technique and good technique. You know, compressor won't fix bad technique, but I just feel like it kind of just glues it all together. Then I've got an exotic RC, which is just a clean boost, just a little bit more umph. And then if I'm playing pick or if I'm doing like rock and stuff and I want the drive, depends on if I want it to be heard or not. But the exotic BB, which is their overdrive pedal, that gets that job done. And then the last effect that I have in the chain is a Boss OC2, which as far as octave pedals go, that's just been my favorite. I've had several different ones, and I just keep coming back to that. So I got rid of the other ones and just kept that one. Now the weird thing that I say that some people kind of ask, I have my tuner at the end of my chain. Most people say, man, you got to put it at the front of the chain.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, I had a big show one day, and I won't say the name of the company of cables that I had, just to, not ruffle that feather. But I was using a specific type of solderless cables, and I had a huge problem with the interconnections. And I go, oh, let me hit my tuner. Let me mute it. I mute it. Well, the problem is it was after the tuner, and everything was still live. So I'm going, why isn't that going on? It's making all this noise.
Oh no.
So I went and I pulled the DI from the line from the DI, and it stopped it. And then I kind of tapped it. You know how we do? You can try to figure out what the problem is. And I plugged it back in, and it was good. And I said, man, I can't ever have that happen to me again, especially not in a setting like this. So I said, what's my fail safe? Well, if I put the tuner at the end of the chain, at least that's the last thing before it goes to the DI. So I did that. And thankfully, it's been great. I have had maybe a couple times over the years, like some little thing, and I'm grateful that I have it there. But I've never had issues with like tuning or the buffer, all that stuff. So I've never had issues with that. And I tell people, like, if I had issues with that, then I wouldn't get called back for the gig. I wouldn't get called back for the studio recordings, because it'd be like, man, we're having to like auto tune your bass, Mike. It's just slightly out of tune. So that's the last piece. It's a tuner at the end. And then my DI that I use is the Noble, the tube DI that I love. I got it some time ago from Jack over at Noble. And man, that piece has just been a phenomenal piece. Will that give you a perfect sound, or do you need all of that gear to have a great sound? No, because I've also had gigs where I don't have any of that, and I just plug the bass straight in. And I mean, I tell everyone, like, the tone obviously is coming from here, like the proper technique, and that's gonna be what gives us just that round tone. We're not like the electric guitar where we need to have the pedals, but we definitely benefit from them. So I've got that. Moving on to the bass, I've got my own custom line that I'm working with the luthier from Nashville, and this is a Ricardo Guitars, and then you'll see here, it's the Mike Zuniga model. So he's building them. Incredible work that he's doing. So obviously it's just the jazz bass, 60 spacing. I'm doing the 2B Plus from Nordstrand. I'm doing the NJ5F, I believe it is, from Nordstrand. So 60s winding, 60 spacing. I'm used to a 19 millimeter spacing, but for this one I wanted to go a little bit more standard. So we went to the 18 hip shot hardware. Everything that Ricardo is doing out in Nashville, he's doing it by hand. And I'm just amazed at the quality. I love this bass because I'm a fan of vintage. I think over the years, everyone is on that search for that perfect 60s jazz bass, that we're all just looking for. And we go to websites and, $4,000 or $5,000, $10,000 for a beat up, jazz bass. And I said, man, we need to recreate something in a new bass that can do the vintage vibe, but also has the ability to do a more modern vibe. So I think that we've nailed it with this one. I've had several guys play it. Even at the NAMM show, I had a buddy play it. He was playing at, I don't remember what booth it was, but they had a phenomenal crowd turnout. And he goes, man, thank you for letting me borrow your bass. And he goes, I was a little bummed out though. And I go, oh man, maybe he didn't like it. I go, and he was joking with me. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time. He goes, I was a little bummed out. And I said, man, what happened? What didn't you like? What do I need to change? No, I was bummed out because after I played the set, like nobody asked me like how long I've been playing, or like, he goes, everybody was asking, what bass is that? Like, oh my God, where can I get that? Like, it sounded phenomenal. I'm like, wow, you got me scared for a second. I thought you were going to tell me the bass is horrible. You need to just scrap it and start all over. So we've been super happy with that. Obviously, I can't leave out what I always say is, in my opinion, the best string in the industry, Elixir. I have used Elixir for so many years, and this is actually the pack that I'm using. Let's see if we can put it on the screen, but it's just the 45 to 130. It's the nickel plated, and it obviously with the nano web. That string for me over the course of years has been incredible because I would go through strings. Man, I remember the days back when we, as you would say, the struggle, when the struggle was real. I would boil strings so much that my wife would be like, you're ruining all of our pots and pans. Like, You need to pick one pot, and that's the string boil pot. Do not touch any other one of my pots. I said, all right. So I would use them. The problem is that with as much frequency as we were playing and traveling, and the humidity and the changes in the climate, obviously even being outdoors and outdoor gigs, the grime and the dirt, man, the strings would last me like 2 or 3 weeks. They sounded phenomenal for 2 or 3 weeks. And then, bass strings are not cheap. Even the cheapest ones are probably 20, 30 bucks. So it got real expensive, and then I said, man, I need to find something else. And somebody said, you need to try a set of elixirs. I've never played those. So I got a set, and to my surprise, I put a set on, and that first time, I was expecting 2 weeks. No, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months. As frequently as we were traveling and playing, I probably could leave a set on for 4 or 5 months, and they still sound great. I know some people like the real zingy, and then other people don't. They like to let them wear down and the more muted. I feel like this is the perfect center because it still sounds fresh and clean, and you get some of that clarity, but it's not like a clanky, and it's not a harsh, and it's also not just a dark and kind of dampened and deadened. It's right in the middle. So man, all the people at Elixir have been incredible. I tried so many years trying to work something out with them, and I said, man, I was like not able to do it, and I would get denied, and people were like, dude, you just need to, get on board with another company. They'll hook you up, they'll get you on their roster list. And I said, man, the problem is, I don't want to be on another company. Like, I don't want to play another string. I want to play these. So it's been awesome, and then they've been so gracious to allow me to be part of the family. So a big shout out to Elixir, and even thank you for kind of setting this interview up. We're so grateful, and just thanking you for this opportunity, just to share about what we've been doing and what we're going to continue to move forward in this next year.
Gotcha. Well, I'm glad you mentioned moving forward. Before we go, what plans do you have coming up?
Yep. So right now we started mid 2021. I started working for a new record label here that's based out of Houston. It's called 418 Records. Actually, my buddy Chris Rocha, the guitar player that I mentioned earlier, he's actually the guitar player for the band Miel San Marcos, decided to have a crazy idea in a time where record labels and, they're kind of not a thing of the past, but, they're not as big as they used to be. He says, man, I want to do a record label, and I want to help, the next generation. I want to help up-and-coming artists. And he goes, but I can't do it by myself. And he says, will you MD the band and put the shows together and be my right hand? I said, man, I'm there. Let's do it. So we, in a year after pandemic, 2021, I think we traveled more than I've traveled at least in the last decade. I mean, it's been awesome, and it was all in the United States, as Latin American countries are still kind of getting things back up. So we're doing that with 418. There's, I think, 4 artists that are signed right now. It's just going great. A lot of exposure, a lot of opportunities. We're looking forward to what is to come there. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we've got the live recording with Miel San Marcos in the Crypto Arena, formerly known as the Staples Center. So we're looking forward to that. And a lot of work in the studio, man. I'm so grateful. I know that even when we were kind of chatting back and forth, it took me so long to get you the stuff that you needed over. And I'm like, man, Raul's not going to be happy with me when we do this interview. But, man, you've been so gracious and so patient. And it's like I said in my email, like, I have nothing but gratitude, for all of these opportunities that are coming up. So we're excited. We're excited for what is to come in the rest of 2022 and 2023 and on, not just for ourselves, but for everyone in the industry. We're really hoping and praying that things will go back to somewhat of a normal, even if it's the new normal.
Sure.
But that we can get back out there and do what we love to do, man. Because if I could choose anything to do in this world and in this life, I truly believe that I'm doing it now. So I'm very humbled and very grateful to have this opportunity.
Very cool. And if people want to know what you're up to, the best place to look, I know on social, it's all Mike X Zuniga.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I haven't gotten to the TikTok trend. Just I can barely hang on to what I've got now. So I'm like, I'll leave that to the bloggers and the influencers. But yeah, all of those social media posts, I'm trying to really get my content up. A lot of people are just kind of digging. I've been doing this thing with bass cams where I've got, my talkback, I've got the click. So it's kind of a different perspective of an inside perspective of what we hear and what we see. So that's been really cool. People have been digging that. So yeah, definitely all of those places you can connect with me, send me a message, and I do my very best to always respond. So, yep.
Very cool. Well, Mike, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us. Folks, you've seen him here. Mike Zuniga, on Bass Musician Magazine.
Thank you.